Working Man Investor. Today's video is going to be on the BRICS Nations and whether or not they're going to dethrone the dollar as the reserve currency of the world, forcing the United States into hyperinflation. Now, there's multiple countries in the BRICS Nations trading bloc now. I'm going to focus on the original five that formed in '09: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So if you do an internet search for the BRICS Nations, you'll come across a lot of content creators, and you'll find some articles talking about how the BRICS nations are going to stop using the dollar. They're going to either create their own currency within their trading bloc, or they're going to use each other's currency. If the United States, due to our deficits, loses our reserve currency status of the world, we'll all suffer in hyperinflation. It sounds really scary. But what a lot of these content creators and articles seem to forget is there's a lot of economic forces in play that make this extremely difficult, and that's what we're going to go over today. So the first thing you need to understand is that there are trade imbalances within the BRICS economies. So what that means is all of them, I'm only talking about the original five, except for India, run a trade surplus. So a trade surplus simply means these countries are manufacturing stuff in their country and they're exporting, selling more to other countries than they're importing, they're buying. So when you sell more than you buy, you run a trade surplus. When you do what the United States does, when you buy more than you sell, you run a trade deficit. And obviously, we run a huge trade deficit. You hear about it in the news all the time. So the reason that these BRICS nations are running a trade surplus is basically because they rely upon the United States and parts of Western Europe to buy all their products. So the United States is the reserve currency of the world. The way that we get our dollar out there for these other countries to use is they export to us, we buy, we pay in dollars. They take our dollars and they build up a dollar reserve. And then what they do is they turn around and they'll use it to settle transactions in the global economy. 60% of transactions in the global economy are settled in dollars. But what they'll do with their excess dollars is they'll turn around and they'll buy treasuries from us, U.S. treasuries from us. This is what a lot of people don't realize, is that while we are the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, we are the only debtor nation in the history of the world that has the absolute privilege to borrow money in our own currency. And we do this by importing, giving other countries their dollar. They build up the dollar, they buy our treasuries, the 10-year, the 2-year, the 30-year note. And then what we'll do is we'll take that money back and we use it to fund our infrastructure, our welfare system, things that benefit the people. And then in turn, what happens is when the 2-year, 10-year expires, we pay them back, they get the money back, and they turn right around and buy our treasuries and loan it back to us. It's just a cycle. That's where, when I talk about the Cantillon effect, this is one of the economic forces. I have a playlist about it. Richard Cantillon studied economics. He was, in my opinion, the founder of economics. He noticed that a domestic state, when they had a windfall of money, was usually the discovery of a gold or silver mine. And that gold or silver mine, as the miners went in and pulled the money out and dumped it into the market, it was a constant flow of money in and out. And when that mine runs dry, that domestic state goes into poverty. Treasury notes are today's modern gold mine. We sell our debt. We export our debt. That is what we export. We sell treasuries to other countries. So this is where the theory and the belief is, if these other nations were to stop using the dollar as the reserve currency of the world and started to use a BRICS dollar or their own currency, they would stop buying our debt. When they stop buying our debt, this new money quits coming into our system. At that point, we all fall into poverty. But as we're going to get into, it's not that simple, just saying we're done with the dollar, we don't like the United States, we're done. Not that easy. The BRICS nations, their citizens also show through statistics they have a low consumption rate. So what that means is their people are workers and savers. They go to work and they save the bulk of their money. They don't make enough and they don't spend enough to consume the products that they're producing. So if it weren't for the United States buying their excess product, they would pile up in warehouses, which would lead to what? Any business. When you're not selling enough of your product, you start to cut back. You cut shifts. You lay people off. You close plants down. You go out of business. These economies without the United States buying their excess would suffer in deflation and unemployment. They just would. So if the BRICS nations truly want to cut the dollar out, they want to get rid of the dollar, they're going to need another country to absorb all their excess because they're not going to run a trade surplus with each other. It's just not going to happen. So what you see in some videos is people saying China can do that. Yeah, maybe. But there's a lot of problems to that. I don't think China wants to do this because they're going to have to completely rebalance their economy. What do I mean by that? China is the largest surplus running nation, meaning they are number one in the world at selling products, exporting. That's how they're bringing money into their economy. That's how they've grown their middle class massively in the past 20 years through all the new money through manufacturing and exporting. So they're selling more than they buy. Therefore, they're not getting much of their currency, the yuan, within the global economy. I've read somewhere that only 3% of the global money is made of the yuan. Because of this, nobody has enough yuan to buy goods at scale that's needed. So China would have to change this. They would have to run massive trade deficits to get their yuan out to these other countries, just like the United States does. This is Triffin's dilemma. I have videos about Triffin's dilemma too. I focus on three economic forces: the Cantillon effect, Triffin's dilemma, and what I'm going to introduce today in the second part of this video is Gresham's law. Triffin's dilemma is an economic force. It's named after Robert Triffin, who stated, "No currency can survive as the reserve currency without requiring the country to run ever-growing deficits. Because a reserve currency presents a difficult paradox, the country must be able to raise capital quickly. Because their currency is in such high demand, remember, 60% of the global transactions are settled in the dollar. The dollar has to be out there. We have to get the dollar out there. Otherwise, there's a liquidity crisis in the global economy, which infects every country in the world, because all of our economies are intertwined now. And at the same time, they want to make sure that their domestic economy is healthy and not running a trade deficit. However, cheap capital and positive trade balances are extremely difficult, if not impossible. It's impossible. We saw this with the United States, and this is the Cantillon effect. We built our standard of living up through manufacturing. And as we did that, as our standard of living built, our exports became more expensive because they had to pay our workers more, and our workers we still built good stuff, but it was more expensive to produce because of the cost of the workforce. As we exported, these other countries saw how expensive it was, so they built their own manufacturing with the goal of not having to buy from the United States anymore because they could produce it cheaper because their standard of living is lower. So they would work for less. You need less money to live on. At first, when they started to build it, it's just like anything else, it was junk. Once they got better at it from doing it over and over again, they bought it from themselves. The citizens bought it from their domestic manufacturing. They cut the United States. Then it went 360 because the United States manufacturing couldn't keep up because everything was too expensive. They couldn't export anymore. They had to sell to the United States citizens. And these other countries were now producing exactly what we were producing, only cheaper, and they began to export it to us, and we began to import it. So then you had the same goods circulating through our domestic economy, stuff manufactured by United States workers, stuff manufactured by China workers. Both products were just as good, but the Chinese products were cheaper because they worked for less money. And because of that, our domestic manufacturing couldn't keep up and it went under. That's how we turned from a manufacturing to a service economy. This is Triffin's dilemma and the Cantillon effect combining. So for China to pull this off, they're going to have to quickly monetize their financial systems, which is based on protection-led industries, meaning they don't let a lot of stuff come in, and they're very careful with their yuan. Obviously, if it's only 3% of the global currency, they do not like getting their money out into the world. Ability would also be needed. So basically what the China's central bank's going to have to do, they're going to have to relax their standards on any type of Chinese government bond they have. So in other words, China would have to come up with a government bond that could compete with the U.S. Treasury. Remember what I said is we're the reserve currency of the world. The U.S. Treasury is considered the most safe and liquid asset in the world because it's backed by the United States government, United States military, our economy, which is the largest in the world. So China would have to compete with that. Not only would China have to compete with that, but the rest of the world is going to have to want their treasury over the United States Treasury. Who's going to want that? The communist country's bond compared to the U.S. Treasury, a capitalist economy, who we constantly have foreign money pouring into our system, not just in U.S. Treasuries, but in investments. Foreign countries come in and invest in our businesses. They open businesses in this country. They don't do that in China. China blocks that. China doesn't want anything to do with that. They want their people working. So this is going to be very, very difficult for China to do this. Nor do I see China wanting to do this. They're not going to want to export their yuan the same way we export the dollar, because what it'll do is it'll lift their exchange rate. The dollar is a stronger currency because it's in high demand. The whole world wants the dollar to do transactions. This makes the dollar stronger. This is what China would have to do. They'd have to strengthen their yuan by making it in demand by the rest of the world. What this will do to China, it'll crush their manufacturing base, leading to a trade deficit. That is because a stronger currency hurts exporting. When a nation's currency is strong, it costs more for other countries to buy your goods and your services. That is bad for domestic manufacturing. A country wants a weaker currency to boost its exports. So what I'm saying here, and this is one of our problems in the United States too, part of the reason why our manufacturing has gone away, our currency is really strong. It's in demand by the rest of the world to do transactions. This strengthens it. So when we export to another country, it takes more of their currency to buy our goods because their currency is weaker than ours. It's why we're a service economy now. We're buying from these countries with weaker currency. Our dollar is stronger. We're able to buy more goods and services from them cheaper. Then we bring it into our economy and we resell it. It's why 70% of what Walmart sells is made in China. 40% of what Target sells is made in China. It's why Mexico is exporting to us a lot. Our currency is stronger than theirs. We're able to buy their products cheaper and then resell it at a reasonable price to our citizens and within our economy. This is one of the huge problems, the strength of currency. So to sum this first part of my video up, there is not enough of China's currency to knock off the dollar for the reserve currency world. They haven't issued enough debt to do all the transactions that the dollar are doing. All other countries in the world have not been able to position themselves to be able to provide the amount of currency for the world to do the transactions that the US dollar is doing. Also, none of them want to. That is key. That's why they all complain and say we need to stop using the dollar, then they don't go and do it. All BRICS nations, they want to be producers, savers. They do not want to be debtor nations like the United States. They want to produce and sell because that is how you build a strong economy if you're not the reserve currency of the world. That is how you become a rich nation. However, if you want to provide the world with a necessary reserve currency like the United States is doing, that means you need to have a safe and liquid asset like the U.S. Treasury that everybody wants. None of the BRICS nations have the deep capital markets that the United States has. None of the countries have the trust in the government and the military that the United States have. And none of them want to be debtor nations. Now, our debt is unsustainable. $34 trillion is ridiculous as of the making of this video, and it's not sustainable, and you've heard Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, say this. You're starting to see Trump try to do something about it with tariffs and stuff like that. I don't know if it's going to work. We'll have to wait and see. So now the other thing I want to address is there's also videos out there saying that the BRICS nations are going to create their own currency. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to call it a BRICS dollar. So they're going to form a currency to use in trade among themselves, and they're going to back it in gold. So I find this very, very difficult to believe as somebody who studies economic history. It's very unlikely because the BRIC nations are going to face the same issues that the United States did when we were on a gold standard. We got to the point where we had $10 billion in gold and $60 billion in dollars floating through the global economy. So if all these countries were to come to the gold window with these dollars, we didn't have enough gold to give to them. So if the BRICS come out with a gold-backed currency to compete with the dollar, there's another economic force that's going to kick in called Gresham's Law. This is really important to understand. Gresham's Law states that bad money is always going to drive good money out of an economy. This was discovered by Sir Thomas Gresham. He lived from 1519 to 1579, and he wrote about the value and minting of coins while he worked as a financier. He noticed when Henry VIII changed the composition of the English shilling, replacing a substantial portion of the silver with base metals, these coins, whether all silver or not, had the same purchasing power. Because of this, the citizens separated the shilling coins of all silver and hoarded them, and used the ones that were base metals to spend. So what does that mean? You got two different shillings here, okay? Let's just say each coin has a purchasing power within their market of 5 shillings. 1 shilling is 99% silver. So it has a melt value, and I'm making these numbers up, trying to keep it simple, of 20 shillings. You got this other shilling that's made up of base metals, or whatever they had back then, tin, copper, aluminum, whatever. It has no melt value. So they're both worth five shillings in the marketplace. So you can, whether the shilling is all silver or base metals, you go to the market, you buy your goods, you can only use it to get 5 shillings worth. What these citizens did, and what Thomas Gresham noticed, is this bad money. The bad money is the all base metals, forced the good money, the silver coins, out of the system, because the citizens hoarded the silver coins and only spent the bad money because the silver coins had more store of wealth, more melt value. They were more valuable. They didn't want to spend them because they were worth more than 5, but they could only get 5 worth of purchasing powers. So if that's still confusing, let me give you another example. The United States has the same issue. Up until 1964, every quarter we minted and every dime was 90% silver. The half dollars up to 1964 were 90% silver, and then from 65 to 69, half dollars were 40% silver. Gresham's Law has kicked in here too. All of these silver coins have been hoarded out of circulation. When you go buy your coffee or whatever, you almost never, it's happened to me 3 times, and only 3 times in 10 years, where you're going to get change back and have a 1964 quarter or dime in it. That's silver, 90% silver. You're going to get 65 and beyond because that's bad money. It's forced the good money, the silver, out, because you can take a silver quarter and it's worth, I don't know the exchange rate, about $5-6. They can sell them on eBay for $7. So what are you going to do? You going to put that in a pop machine, or are you going to? No. Bad money forces good money out of the system. Now, what does Gresham's Law have to do with the gold standard? First of all, for it to be a true gold standard, just like the United States had, the BRICS nations are going to have to set up what's called a gold window. So basically, what's going to happen is these countries are going to be exporting, selling their products to these other countries and getting BRICS dollars in return. When they get an excess amount of BRICS dollars, like now when they get an excess of dollars, they buy treasuries. Instead, when they get an excess of dollars, they're going to go to the gold window of BRICS and say, here's your BRICS dollars. Give us that gold that's backing it. And whatever countries put the gold up to back the BRICS dollars are going to go broke. Because the most industrious country within this trading bloc, in this example, it's China, is going to take all the BRICS dollars and take it to the gold window and turn it in and hoard all the gold, and all the other nations will go broke. This is Gresham's Law. This is the problem with a gold-backed dollar. It's why they haven't done it, and in my opinion, it's why they won't do it for as long as the dollar is in circulation, because the dollar is the bad money in this example. The BRICS money is the good money because it's backed by dollars. So what's going to happen? Everybody's going to do transactions in the global economy with the dollar that's competing with the BRICS dollar. They're going to take the BRICS dollar and they're going to take it to the gold window and get gold. And whoever put up gold is going to go broke, whatever country. They're going to run out of gold. and it'll be forced out of the economy, and the dollar will prevail. King Dollar the Destroyer. It is not going to be easy to get rid of the dollar. So if the BRICS nations do issue a gold-backed currency, we're going to find the gold disappearing and the dollar strengthening. This is basically what I want you to get out of this video, is that there's economic forces in play. When you start to see these people on the internet, I call them doomers, trying to convince you to buy gold and silver because the dollar is going to crash and we're all going to suffer in hyperinflation. If we continue on this path, that could happen, but when? Not today, not tomorrow, probably not 2 years from now, probably maybe 10, 20, 50, 100. I don't know. I don't know how long we can keep this going. But there are economic forces in play that make it very, very difficult. So I know people, unfortunately, that have watched these guys on YouTube and have gone out and put $50,000 into physical silver coins. Not a good decision. That's what I want you to avoid. I want you to get out of my channel. I want you to get that solid foundation of a financial education, that when you hear things like the dollar is doomed, it's all going to go away tomorrow, think about, well, no, the Cantillon effect, Triffin's dilemma, and now Gresham's law. And you can start to base your decisions off of that. It's good to have some gold or silver in your portfolio. I'm not saying it's not. It's good to have some crypto in your portfolio. But don't make it all your portfolio because you think the dollar is going to become completely useless and we're all going to fall in poverty. And if that happens, what is going on in the world? You know, I see some of these guys on YouTube screaming about, I'm going to be so rich because I've got all this gold and silver hoarded. When the dollar collapses, I'm going to be rich. Yeah, okay. You're going to be rich. And everybody's 401k is worthless. The people that have pensions are worthless. People's savings are worthless. People's wealth is wiped out. But hey, you're rich. Everybody else is miserable, but hey, you got rich and you're excited for that? That's terrible. And furthermore, imagine the chaos that's going to come from that. So yeah, you've got all this gold and silver, you can buy things, but now that neighbor that you used to hang out with across the street that you really, really liked and you'd have a beer with and you discuss your favorite sports team, he's now starving. He knows you got some food, so he's trying to break into your house and you got to shoot him to protect your cans of green beans. But hey, you're rich. You got all this gold and silver, man. You're rich. Congratulations. You don't want to build wealth off of other people's misery. That's what I want you to think too. So have some gold, some silver, some Bitcoin to hedge against inflation, to protect yourself. But don't sit back and cheer for the dollar to collapse and everybody to fall into misery so you could be rich. And don't fall into these traps that these people are talking about when they're only giving you one side of the story. They're not discussing Triffin's dilemma, Gresham's law, the Cantillon effect. Have to think for yourself. You have to educate yourself. You have to cut through all this noise that's out here, all this chaos that's out here, and think for yourself. And you have to do it to protect yourself and your family financially. That's all I got for you. Working man investor. Keep grinding, people.